Find somewhere dark and quiet. Put your headphones on. Listen like you are the one alone in the trees. Tonight's story is called The Pines That Walk.
A tent flaps once in still air. The night is flat. No animal breaks the silence. Then a single line of boot-shaped depressions circles the tent, perfect ovals pressed into the pine needles, until they stop at the rim of a frozen cup of coffee. No footprints leave. No one is there.
Do you feel that? The image settles before you can explain it. Who walked around the sleeping person and left only a ring of human steps that never passed the threshold? Listen closely now. This is where it gets interesting.
Hollow Ridge sits like a scar on a ridgeline of pines, narrow switchbacks, a gravel pullout that smells of damp resin in early morning. Locals know the place by its wind, an east sift that combs the needles, and by a set of old trails rangers keep clear for mountain goats and for hikers who still like to bring coffee up at dawn.
Ranger Lewis has spent a decade on those trails. He knows the bark, the blind turns, the places where the ground holds heat through the winter. He makes his rounds by habit, boots in the same rhythm, radio checked, lantern clipped, little rituals that keep the job human. He will tell you he never expected the woods to answer back.
I started as a seasonal crew. Then I took the park job. You memorize the trail markers the way others memorize faces. The ridgeline is full of memory. Old fires, logged stumps, names carved into benches. Still, the first time I found those impressions, I thought, somebody's messing with us.
They were not prank-sized scuffs. They were perfectly formed impressions, sole patterns like a boot pressed into a soft carpet of needles, repeated in a slow, deliberate loop. Not a path leading anywhere, but a rehearsal of walking. The ring came back to the same starting mark, as if someone practiced a routine around a point, then stopped.
I woke up because my tent zipper sounded different. I thought it was my partner, but he was asleep. In the morning, there were these circles. I thought maybe an animal, but it looked like somebody had walked in boots, very careful, around us. It felt like the forest had inspected us.
Trail camera footage added a sharper edge. Cameras facing the ring captured a blank stretch of sway. Trees, low light, the slow flutter of a moth. Frame after frame, nothing moving where the prints were. When researchers reviewed the time-lapse, the needles appeared disturbed in the morning, but no moving form ever crossed the frames.
We told ourselves it was wind patterns, deer, the kind of explanation you cling to. But the grooves were shaped like boot soles. They had tread. They crossed soft ground where an animal could not leave such a print. That alone was hard to accept. Then we started finding them elsewhere.
Once is strange. Twice is a pattern. Over months, more rings appeared. At a picnic clearing, around an old cell tower, circling an abandoned ranger cabin. Each site kept the same slow cadence. The spacing between prints consistent, as if a single gait were being copied and recopied by the forest itself.
An old ranger's leather-bound journal turned up in a donation box at the park office. Its pages were full of patrol notes, weather logs, and an entry scratched in a hurried hand. 1923, found a line circling the monument. Imprint like a New England brogue, no tracks leading away. The handwriting trembled across the page. The note ended with, "The trees remember feet."
When a former ranger handed me that journal, he didn't smile. He said, "They used to joke, pines that walk, but nobody joked after the search party started." I read pages where men who had seen a lot of the forest still used the language of unease. That was our first real alarm.
Animals behaved differently near the rings. Dogs refused to cross certain grooves. A pair of deer skirted around them in tight arcs. Birds avoided perches within the circle. The evidence wasn't only human testimony, it was patterning in motion. The woods, it seemed, had grown selective about who moved through it.
Weeks of data, interviews, and anonymous notes eventually led to a single decision. Find a fresh line and follow it. Not to prove anything, not to conquer a mystery, to know where the walk led, so someone could map it and stop it if necessary. Ranger Luis volunteered. He said he would follow at dusk, when the light thins and the trees' voices get close.
I left a note in the office log. My wife knows the trails. She told me to call if anything felt off. I packed minimal gear, headlamp, radio that pinged once every 5 minutes, a camera, and the old journal. There's a point where curiosity becomes obligation. That's when it stops being a job and starts being personal. He found a fresh line in the late amber of dusk. The impressions were crisp. 2 sets of tread, spaced like mine when I walk, like yours when you step. He set his headlamp low, not to glare, but to keep his eyes used to the dark. He followed. At first, the forest copied nothing. Then, faintly, rhythm returned. A soft echo of his own step answered the wood, as if someone else matched him, half a pace behind.
At first, I thought I was imagining it, a trick of hearing, the way your own head can turn your breath into other voices. But it kept time. Toe, heel, toe, heel. My breathing changed to fit the cadence. It was subtle. It felt almost polite. Then the echo shortened the gap, as if it were learning me.
The forest began to do something unnerving. It rehearsed him. Needles compressed into the outline of his boot behind him. The sound of footsteps folded into the undergrowth so that every crack answered him in the same rhythm. It was as if the trees had been practicing human movement for decades, waiting for a foot to call the pattern alive.
Pace tightens here. Listen to the breath. The line led him deeper, through rhododendron chokes, over a brook that whispered, and into a stand of pines so dense the world became a low green cathedral. He told himself to turn back. He told himself to radio. He didn't. The ritual had a pull.
There was a moment, maybe 30 yards in, when I realized the prints ahead had switched. They weren't just copying me. They started to anticipate a step I hadn't made yet. The pattern shifted shape, angling around a root before my foot had lifted. I felt watched in a way that wasn't human. I felt studied, catalogued. That's when the fear settled in behind my ribs.
He tried to stay calm. He took his radio out. Nothing. He took a photo. Static, then a smear across the frame, where a set of compressed needles looked as if they'd worn the impression of a soul for generations. He took 1 step off the line to call in coordinates. The forest answered, with an extra set of prints beside his, exactly where his boot had just been.
The sound design is simple here. Thumbs on the cadence of a heartbeat. Step, step, step. Louder in the chest. Shorter sentences. He ran then, not because something chased him in the way you imagine, but because the place that had reflected his gait began to lead it. The boundary between imitation and agency collapsed. The woods were no longer echoing. They were instructing.
I left the line. I don't know why I did. Maybe I wanted the forest to stop learning me. Maybe I wanted to catch whatever was mimicking. My boots hit fresh, soft ground, and the shadow widened. When I looked back, the impressions kept going, away from me, as if they had decided on a destination of their own.
In the days that followed, search teams found a last known trail for a missing hiker in an adjacent basin. His pack was untouched. His footprints led to the edge where the trail of compressed needles began, and then those human prints stopped. Around the edge, pressings formed a ring, like a rehearsal that had been paused mid-instruction.
People stopped camping in certain clearings. We put out more lights and we left radios on at night. Some people laughed it off. Others locked their cars and slept with the windows up. You don't want to be the person who says, "I felt watched," because then everyone looks at you.
But the circles kept appearing.
The park put up notices advising caution. Researchers collected soil from the grooves. Labs found compacted organic matter, but nothing that explained locomotion without a body. The journal entries kept arriving, older rangers, older notes, each one adding a layer of repetition until the effect felt less like coincidence and more like history folded into earth.
After that night, I check my porch lights more often. I sleep on the side that faces away from the trees. I avoid walking the ridge alone at dusk. Maybe that sounds small. Maybe it sounds reasonable. But you do what you can to preserve the part of your life that feels like yours.
Evidence can be cataloged and cleaned. People can be warned. But some things linger. Patterns, echoes, habits, stitched into a place by people who were once there. The last image I carried from Hollow Ridge was simple and precise. A single measured step taken on a dark front step in town. A faint cup of compressed needles left at the threshold, as if the pines had come to look inside.
A neighbor found it at dawn, one pine-breast soul at the doorstep of a house 3 miles from the ridge. No other prints, nothing disturbed. The cup of morning coffee sat untouched inside. Sometimes the forest walks far enough that the paths it practices reach the places we think of as safe.
If you're still here, the story followed you to the end. Take a breath. Look around your room. Make sure everything is exactly where you left it. I'm Samnang. If this episode stayed with you, share it with someone who listens in the dark. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell a friend. Where beauty meets terror, nature's dread keeps watch.
Until next time, check the corners. Keep your eyes open. And your lights, maybe not too bright. Good night.